Hello, hello. Uh, hey again,
Hey.
everyone. Thanks for joining the office hours. We're here with Cerbo AI. I'll let them introduce themselves first. Haha, do you want to go?
Of course. Yeah, glad to be here. Thank you for the great invitation, Illia and Alex. Finally, nice meeting you too. So I'm Haha. I'm the co-founder of Cerbo AI. I came from a background with masters in robotics at UPenn and obviously worked in blockchain for almost 2 years right now. And really excited to see, how AI and Web3 can intertwine with each other and provides true user case in the future. Yeah, glad to be here. Thank you.
Hello.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Perfect.
okay, it's my turn. I'm CCS, and I'm in charge of the Cerbo's product. I lead everything from the open source project to the protocols to the D app that we're integrating on top of the POFL. And happy to be here and learn more.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining. It's always amazing to dive in with founders, what you guys are working on. So maybe tell us more about kind of how you're approaching the space, what you see, and maybe more as well about your founding team.
Of course, yeah. So me and CC were family friends, know each other since quite a while, and yeah. So I always like worked in blockchain ever since I graduated from master, and don't really knowing exactly how artificial intelligence could intertwine with blockchain. Whereas we started to brainstorming about what is the most beneficial way for AI model developers and AI application developers in the future. Whereas we started to notice like data shortage is one of the things, or it's pretty much like the threshold that limited, not limited, but in some ways limiting the AI industry's development. And in another way, if people, we all know human beings, and if people don't get enough of or transparent or fairly incentive to convince them to support the AI industry, so why are they contributing their private reserve data? And that's sort of the major questions that we started to see. I think last year around March, and that was the first time. Whereas I think the scaling law was such a big term that was being constantly mentioned, not only in AI, but also in blockchain communities as well. So we think, hey, if we can do anything that leverage the benefits or the advantage that blockchain could bring to AI industry or community, or even to see users, that would be the best, because ultimately people are the one who is contributing and conducting the data, right? So that's the major topic, and I can give a deeper understandings about exactly how Cerbo AI leverage that and how do we want to do with it. But CC, I feel like maybe you can give a better understanding from your perspective, because you came from a Google background, and also you have been doing AI applications and research for quite a while as well, right?
Right. So the fundamental problem that we're trying to solve is that we see, okay, there's a lot of the projects on top of the ecosystem that they worry about the privacy. And what we're trying to do is just a layer that helps every project, whether you want to build an advanced application on top of that, or you want to build some use cases, or you want to build agent, or even you want to build some models. And because like there's a lot of the open source models in the community now. So then what scenario, like whether the scenario is application or use case or models, we would love to provide the protocol to them so that they don't really have to worry about any data privacy reserved issue. Because the way that we're using is not really just relates to data, it only relates to parameters. So then like in that way, nobody has to really worry about, okay, if we're going to save the data into some decentralized storage and then like to release it afterwards, or we have to find different very expensive data consumption like solutions out there. What we do is pretty simple. We just compress the data into the parameters so that everybody, what they've seen on chain is only the parameters, not the data at all. So then we think it's the best way for so far all the project that we've seen to protect the privacy, and especially when it comes to the app layer, to see use cases and to be model issuers.
So give a summarizations of what exactly is Cerbo AI. Cerbo AI is more like a cutting edge AI and blockchain focused protocol, whereas we build on the visions of more of a decentralized and privacy preserving machine learning open source the network or protocol. I would say we have a small vision, and it could be a big vision as well, to democratize AI and also ensure that the user data, which is the in our cases the model parameter weights, remains private while unlocking the values from decentralized AI computations. So that's Cerbo AI.
And so my understanding is like underlying, you're pretty much using a federated learning model, right? Where every kind of user's device is updating the model on their own data. So indeed, the data doesn't go anywhere, never leaves consumer devices, but instead the updated model is being checkpointed back to blockchain kind of as updates being shared. And so like that's kind of the general model you're going after, where the training happens always on user's device, and then the kind of common model is then available for everyone.
I would say that's a good understanding perspective. In our words, that we would like to say, hey, this is like more of a POFL protocol, whereas we leverages and a distributive blockchain-based middle layer infrastructure to facilitate secured and decentralized machine learning system. How to understand this better? So through the POFL model or through the POFL protocol, node participants in using AI applications and training AI models without requiring a centralized data storage to process. So yes, your understanding for the most part is correct. And blockchain serves as more of a ledger to validate and verify models updates, and give a fairly amount of the incentive back to the communities based on their contributions, and also ensuring everything can be fully transparent and fairly rewarded distributions for all the participants, and to also for us to able to ensure this part of the distributions or of the rewards, there has to be a really I would say a multi-roles participations engaged from the blockchain perspective, whereas the POFL creates more of a secured environment where stakeholders they collaborate and to train and monetize AI models and AI applications with model parameters weights in a decentralized manner. So I can go deep about essentially like how do we achieve and what exactly we have designed for us to make sure that's the entire the dynamic economic models and to guides the incentive mechanisms within the ecosystem.
So before you go into the incentives, what are the I'm curious to know what are the early use cases you see, like what sort of models, because if you're training llama on like on a large corpus of text, that doesn't have to be federated, right? So like I assume federated learning is more interesting in the situation where we want to train, like I guess federated learning came up in the context of training the swipe keyboard, right? Right. So like everybody is typing on the keyboard. There's a lot of data, but obviously nobody wants what they type on the keyboard to be known to Google or especially to other people, right? So if the model regurgitates, your social security number on another keyboard, that's substandard, right? So I'm curious to know what are the use cases you envision, or maybe you're already going after.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would answer it from more of a ecosystem perspective, whereas CC, you can jump in and say, hey, these are the AI models that we already supplied. But to be honest, I would say the Cerbo AI's target audience is not primarily focused on AI model issuers. We're primarily focused on AI-powered application developers groups, whereas some of the killer use case that we already seen that could include private preserving AI applications such as healthcare's, obviously federated learnings for collaborative AI models training across hospitals without sharing sensitive patients' data. So that's one. And secondly, finance, AI or AI for fraud detections and credit scoring without really exposing your or anyone's personal financial data. We all don't want to expose any of that information out to the public. Now, sometimes even not to the bank, and that's why we're having blockchains as more of the assets transportations layers, right? So in the other layers, or in the other perspective, the IoT's projects were edge-based AI for smart devices, which could leverage FL to also improve like local device intelligence, while also keeping the data locally. So that's from my perspective. Cici, feel free to jump in more.
Yeah, it's my answer is pretty much the same. We don't really at this stage power, like, for example, 100 different models, or even that you can open the new models. We actually just so we'll be able to connect with the majority of the fundamental open source models there, like Llama, Alpaca, and the majority of the models that I think 90% of the application would be based on that. And then what we can do is that we can compress the model size, we can actually compress the data size into 2 KB, which a lot of the issuers can, or a lot of the developers, or a lot of the application issuers can build based on that, no matter what application it is. One of the things that we're doing right now is to see what applications they might need the 2 KB is still too big for them, or too small for them, or just for that use case they need a much more reliable model, they need a much more intelligent model. So they probably cannot accept the 2 KB's performance, they probably want 10 KB or 15 KB. So that is basically all the circumstances or the case studies that we want to implement in the open source next step.
So just to double check, when you say 2 KB, do you mean that's updates on top of a base model? Is that what you mean?
The 2 KB
like 2
means
kilobytes.
It means the parameters. So the parameters weight is only 2 KB.
But this is like low rank updates, right? Adaptation on top of
it's a low rank
bigger model.
Yes.
Got it. Alex?
I don't know. That was more or less my own question. I just tried to understand where the number is coming from. So it's interesting that you mentioned that they all measured in KBs. Like I never heard of LoRa updates of that size. So that's a novel concept for me. But I'm also curious. So my understanding of federated learning is relatively limited, right? So I was sort of into it back when it came out, which was, I think, 7 years ago now. And so the way I understand it is that in practice, it's been shown to be sufficiently. My understanding, right? Like going back to Swipe, right? My understanding is that when I use Google Keyboard, it does use federated learning, right? So everything I type does go to Google servers, and it's trained, and Google trains.
No. That's not how it works. No.
I mean, the weight updates go to the Google servers, right?
The weight updates, yeah. So it updates locally, and then the weight diff is sent, and then they all get segregated.
Right. So the but I read that paper, right, back in the day on the federated learning, and the security analysis back then, I assume many things changed in 7 years, right? But security analysis back then was very hand-wavy. They put a very hand-wavy security model under which it was very secure. And what I'm interested in is that you mentioned several use cases such as healthcare or like banks, right? So they have security requirements where you cannot just publish a hand-wavy paper on archive, right? So like I'm curious if it is actually something viable today to use federated learning for healthcare, like if the healthcare companies would actually be willing to use to share weight updates based on the patient data. Like, is it the actual reality today? Does it make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. But to be honest, like from my perspective, we have started to interacting with some of the healthcare startup whereas the developers that we're focusing on right now is most of the Silicon Valley based startup who already started to implement some of the AI models into their services, right? So this is like our target audience. And our target audience, one of them is actually in conversations with San Francisco's hospitals, whereas they are supplying those hospitals to build I wouldn't say an AI agent, but more like a really comprehensive, like more of a supply chain optimizations systems, whereas they could synchronize and track about different like hospitals and see like what are the, for example, like A hospitals has the majorities of patients for one type of disease or for several type of disease. So they want to optimize, how quick and how fast and how accurate they can fulfill the inventories for most of their medicines or drugs. So that's one of the developer groups that we started to engage with, and their concern is really straightforward. Those hospitals, they don't want to share their data with any of the third parties, including other hospitals that are collaborating with them. They could collaborate in the research and case-by-case patient weights, but they don't share information in that levels. And one of the things that we started to notice that privacy is not only a big concerns for them, but their inventory tractions is also a big concerns in terms of like, despite of the individual informations that could be possibly leaking out. I don't know, I'm not exactly understanding, the concerns behind these reasons, but I understand like from different perspectives that anything that related with healthcare status, and even from, a commercialized perspective, they wouldn't want to share with any outsiders, including, I would say Google's, because they obviously are not using Shopify's or are not using other like inventory optimization SaaS at the moment, whereas they prefer to build their own controlling systems from all, that links all of the departments and laboratories within their individual hospital system. So that's what we see currently. But again, we're not directly engaging with the healthcare provider. We're more engaging with the tech companies that provides, consultings or agencies for those hospital customers.
Yeah, because something I'm very interested in is whether since Federated Learning came out, they actually managed to if now there's a sufficiently rigorous proof of Federated Learning not leaking data that healthcare or banks would be fine with that, because I think that if we get to that level of acceptance of Federated Learning, that enables a lot of interesting use cases.
Yeah, interesting that you mentioned bank. We have not yet catch up with bank, but we have catch up with several wallet developers already. So major things that they have concerns is that, well, they don't really concerns about the privacy because everything, the users' transportations of any sort of assets will be recorded on chain. But they do concerns about, hey, what is the next step for those wallet applications to engage or to expand their product features to better engage with their communities. Right now, we see wallet as some applications that you receive and issue out the transactions. Right. In the future, most of the wallet developers, they're not thinking about that. They're thinking to even intertwine or engage with some assets management product features that can be powered by AI, or they can most of them are thinking, hey, can they engage with AI agents to supply and provide some of the what do you call that, like investment advice within the wallet products. So this is like the next generations of how I see our potential customers will be developing in. If that's the case, then hey, how do you deal with the user data privacy? It has nothing to do with blockchain. In that way, it's actually related back with most of the users are having the wallets on their personal devices, such as PCs and iPhones like me. But how do I leverage that perspective? I don't really use USDT and USDC to pay most of my personal supply expense. I use fiat. I use I still live a good life here on Earth, so I have to engage with fiat payments mostly for my private life, right? Well, if that's the case, then how can they understand this person's expense, and how can they locally trained some proportions of that models to be able to power it and also provide good information and good advice within the wallet. I think that's sort of related back with what we're seeing for our user case. And I do think like federated learning is a part of that. And Cici, you can feel free to speak more.
Right. Before I speak more, just wondering if you have any questions so far.
No, not yet.
Okay, all right. Okay, so I think in terms of the application, we just talk about, like different applications like, well, like hospital, like, well, even finance, maybe there's transportation, like a lot of the different scenarios. But what we think right now, what should be the most application is there's a lot of the agent companies are building some service aggregators or scenarios, or when it comes to, efficiently help customers to leverage the agent or the AI models to do something. So in that case, it is a model issuer, or like it is a 2B customer who's building an application, but it's directly facing a lot of the 2C users. And a lot of the 2C users, they actually really care about, number one, how fast this process can be. And number two, how private, like if they can actually protect their data. And number three, if they can save some money. So our proof of federated learning actually can be able to enable all of these three. We can not only just, because you have less parameters out there for the LoRa training, for the low run training. So then in that case scenario, we actually did some calculation. We can save the cloud cost by 30% to 40%. So it is a low cost approach for a lot of the 2B customers. And two, when we said that we compress the parameters into 2 KB, it's a way for people to have a great user experience out there, to even enable more devices in the future for training. And three, when we say privacy reserved, we mean that because we don't directly interact with the data itself, we only interact with the parameters. So then we don't really get the user data to upgrade the model. It's very different from the traditional federated learning training or the traditional fine tuning or the ways like that. So like on that three perspective, we think a lot of the agent applications, a lot of the applications that's just directly facing to C are the great applications, no matter it is in hospital or it is in finance or it is in transportation.
So you mentioned it's cheaper for people to train the model. So in this case, the idea would be that someone is training the model on their data, and the federated learning helps them train it cheaper, or they still train it on the data of someone else. What is the use case? So the person who's saving 30%, are they training their data, or they train on someone else's data?
They're still training their data, but the data is not being trained. The parameter is the one that's being updated. So you have less parameter, and intuitively, the cost is less.
I see. So it's not just about federated learning. It's generally a different architecture, which is somehow smaller than just training LoRa.
Yes.
So maybe switching gears a little bit, as this is happening, right? How is kind of quality ensured? How do people get rewarded for it? What is the what is the economic incentives to be kind of doing the right thing, as well as disincentive for doing the wrong thing?
Good question. So we have already designed a really, I would say, dynamic economic model, whereas we guide users to build ecosystem, build on top of the ecosystem, and control the quote unquote evil behaviors of users. Like you said, for example, like Illia or Alex, you spend it like 10 days playing on one of the AI applications that's sort of deployed on top of POFL, on our POFL, versus a Southeast Asia studio that they have like several different devices, also spent a few days, but doing like redundant movement or actions that's still accumulated like 32 KB versus your 32 KB, like who evaluated more. Obviously, there has to be a really straightforward and transparent scenario and mechanism to guide this. But before we dive deep into that, I want to emphasize like who is going to be the one who raises, hey, Alex or Illia, your 32 KB earns, let's say like 0.1% of the entire Cerbo AI token versus, the Southeast Asia studio could earn like 0.0001% of the token. There has to be a multi-role on-chain governance mechanisms that implemented within the system, whereas we design multi-different positions to raise this the incentive and also issue it, right? So role A is going to be the reviewer and uploader who is going to be linking the results of horizontal comparisons of model performance. And role B is going to be the challengers who is going to challenge and also reveals role A's results. Role C is going to be, the challengers admin or super admin who is going to review on top of role B's. Whereas we see, well, in the future, we hope that, there will be millions of 2C users via those AI applications who is constantly engaging with the POFL protocols. Well, if that's the case, then role A, role B, role C has to be, or what we foresee has to be a pyramid structures, whereas role A will be contains the largest participations populations to be able to execute and instantly, well, not instantly, but we're trying to have them to instantly rewards or reviewing the model performance, whereas role B will be more of a prestigious or slightly lesser population-wise of the participations, who is on top of role A and is checking on any red flags that role A raises up, or if there are any enormous activities that has been perceived or voted by role A. And role C will be a really smaller group, whereas we would like to engage with more of the AI expertise and obviously Cerbo AI's teams and the other teams that engages and collaborate with us to also overseeing the entire structures in case there are any like enormous incentive executions on top of the protocol. So this on-chain distributions systems will generate different levels of tokens based on frequency, numbers of participants, and the importance based on role A, role B, role C's distributions of different rewards. And the next questions for us to resolve is that who is going to be the reward receiver? Obviously, there are two stakeholders going to be receiving the rewards: developers and communities, which means the 2C users who at least have a physical device to be able to engage the AI applications that deploy on top of the POFL protocol. Whereas we have this matrix, we check on the qualities and the quantities. And whereas the quantities is really straightforward, we quantifying based on the weight over each model updation. So Alex and Illia's 32 KB versus Southeast Asia's 32 KB in this level might be weights the same, but then deeper engage with the qualifying POFL score, whereas we combined data scores, model contribution scores, and validation accuracy scores. Together, this POFL score is proportionally to pretty much to the amount of newly minted rewards that will be allocated back to the participants. So even though the 32 KB is the same, but then underneath that, the qualities that it brings to the model performance updates are different. So at this moment, everything is still in testification period, whereas we have already implemented one of the universal model performance formulas or evaluation formulas. But in the future, there will be an open door for any other formulas that can be raised by the communities and developers in the future. So that's the entire I would say like tokenomics incentive mechanism that we started to build up. And for us to be able to better execute on top of it, there has to be, different participations representing different scope and stakeholders to be able to engage.
So I find it, so I mentioned it every now and then on the office hours, right? But we've been running a system where people annotate data, which is not quite the same as federated learning, or not the same at all. But it shares an important property that people contribute something that can only be subjectively verified, and they get the reward for that, right? Because I don't know very well how proof of federated learning works, right? But like from the first principles, right? Because I don't reveal my data, I don't think I can provide any attestation that the data I used was in any way relevant to the data set, right? And so correspondingly, the way I understand the fundamental concept of proof of federated learning is that at the end of the day, the only way to confirm that what I submitted makes sense is by testing it against some held out set, right? So there's right. So in the in case of coming back to the swipe example, right? If I use Google Keyboard, I have literally no incentive to submit incorrect completions to Google, right? And if there's 100 million people using Google Keyboard, even if I try to DDoS them with invalid submissions from one person, I think they can prevent it from happening, right? In case of Cerbo, there's a massive incentive for people to submit invalid results, right? Because it's I can only get that much useful data to submit to you, right? But I can fabricate an infinite number of bad updates, right? And so people will be doing that, right? Like the biggest lesson I learned from our data annotation efforts is that once you start paying people money, they become extremely creative, right? Like the IQ of people grows by a factor of 2 the moment they can get money for free, right? So I think where it gets interesting is like the actual concept of proof of federated learning, right? That's something that is very interesting to dig into at some point to understand how, let's say, I assume you need updates from, let's say thousands of people, right? So you get thousands of updates. You obviously cannot do every permutation of them to validate, and each particular update is relatively small, right? Like when you train a neural network between 2 consecutive epochs, the loads can go up. It doesn't mean that the update was useless, right? It's just right. So it's interesting if you guys can share any high level of proof of federated learning, at which level does it operate? How much interaction does it require from the community? How reliable?
Also, who runs this evaluation, right? Who evaluates the validation accuracy?
That's a really good question. So that goes back to the mechanism that I was describing earlier. There will be role A, role B, role C, right? So whereas role A, who is going to be the reviewer or the uploader, who is making comparisons or horizontal comparisons of different model performance. To answer your questions, Alex, yes, each of the updates has to be verified. Otherwise, like you said, people will get extremely creative to earn, to earn money or to earn incentive if they don't know the criteria. Even they know the criteria, they still would think, hey, maybe I can squeeze something in, or I can squeeze, the redundant data into the entire board update, and you wouldn't be able to find it. You will still evaluate me as the 32 KB, as the good 32 KB. No, it's not going to be true in our scenario. The POFL score that we designed here actually check based on top of the qualities of each different update. three things, like I mentioned before, has been combined right here: the data score, the model contribution score, and the validation accuracy score. So that's the high level, like giving you a framework of how exactly the POFL scores has been made up. So those are the three perspectives, whereas we weighted them differently with a formula right now, and we issue the incentive based on top of the POFL score. Although the quantity is really important, because that's like one of the first thresholds, but we treat it as more of a normal parameters within this entire POFL score formula, whereas it's like a small things, but then you have like a big formulas up or right after that, whereas this is like the true part of how much incentive you, as a normal 2C users or any of the users, you will be able to earn. So that is the POFL score that we embedded within the system. And I understand what you're saying. Hey, if there are millions of users, how can you execute, or how can you review each individual updates? So this is one of the things that we want to engage with the developers, and also try to understand, how the developer communities designed their applications. What we are doing is that we are engaging with one group of developers, whereas designing a more of a application like decentralized AI series, whereas we call them a Fairy. So Fairy is applications that is a proof of concept within the ecosystem. You can engage with it. I'm sure, like everyone, if you guys have time, already check on the Apple product launch presentations yesterday or last night. You engage with this applications, and then the AI agents behind this, or the AI model behind that applications would able to help you to execute, say, hey, give you a Uber, or give you a Lyft, or buy you something on Amazon simultaneously, by already knowing you enough. So this is like one of the applications that we're seeing, and we're supporting them from the POFL infrastructure or the middle layer perspective. And this application, or this application developer groups, they're really interesting. They don't update each actions of the models or of the user interactions on chain. What they do is that they gave the users a freedom for them to choose, hey, do you want to update all of the actions that you're already interacting with the applications on a weekly basis or on a daily basis? So actually, surprisingly, the 2C users or the individual users, they have the control of how frequent they want to locally even train the models. So it's not like you're interacting with the applications and simultaneously it has been already trained. Yes, it gathers that data from a local device's perspective, but it doesn't really necessarily means it will be trained locally simultaneously. So user has 100% controls, at least for this AI application group, whereas we started to see they gave the users the choice to when would be the best time to train on top of your phone, right? They are right now supplying iPhone 14 and plus. And so this is the freedom, whereas it doesn't really cost for the entire protocols to constantly have to update or have to review each single actions based on top of that, what is the model parameter weight, and then evaluate that. It wouldn't be that efficient. We would actually encourage the developers to well design their applications to be able to maintain the best efficiency for the entire network or protocol ecosystems. And then after the users, hey, let's say weekly updates, and accumulated enough of actions or interactions with the AI model powered applications locally, they trained their historical threads or their personal data, and then from there we will be able to help them to train on local device scenario, and that parameters weights will be recorded on chain with individuals users notifications saying, hey, you're the updates this part of the things on chain. And then from there, the AI reviewers or the uploaders will be interacting with that informations and verified, what is the value of it. So overall, like there will be, or we foresee there might be some traffic jam for the row A, since our mission is to power millions of users. There might be some traffic jams for row A's to review, because we cannot, say, hey, all the AI application developers, you have to do weekly or monthly. We give them the choice, but we, nicely advise them to have, wisely designed of how often they want to update the model parameters weight. And then from there, row A is going to be a really big populations, since they are, not as much as to see individual developers or to see individual users, but they needs to be at least 1/3 or 1/4 of that populations to be able to maintain such a big traffic. So that's what we're seeing. But at the beginning, everyone is welcoming to become the reviewer and uploader, as long as you have the physical device to run on top of it, and submit your results on chain. So that's what we're seeing. Yeah, I hope that answered your questions.
So the idea of doing it infrequently is primarily to save the bandwidth, right? It's not like security consideration or
no.
Well, I'm assuming if you're evaluating every single update on some evaluation metric as well, right? You kind of need to wait until there's enough updates for that to matter. I think.
Yeah.
I mean, there's multiple dimensions here that I think worth considering, because I mean, obviously these models are highly non-interpretable at the current stage, and so one of the challenges that people are already seeing is so-called sleeper agent problem, where we're able to introduce pretty much a triggering behavior that doesn't actually show up at the evaluation stage by pretty much creating gradient updates on specific, if it's 2025, do this, and otherwise don't trigger that. And so I think there's an interesting question of the evaluation set is always going to be, just a subset of the distribution, and especially anything that's out of distribution on the data is going to be really hard to evaluate. So I think you're trying to pretty much say, well, we're going to have smaller updates, right, in general, which is kind of harder to influence. But I think for a broader kind of decentralized training space, this is probably one of the major issues in general, is how do you, if you're just getting parameter updates and that's all, you don't really know if this is really malicious update that looks okay, or this is actually a legit update, or this is just a random update that actually doesn't improve the model and somebody's just spamming with random numbers as well, right? So I think kind of I would say probably more studying, a full kind of research needed on the dependency and detection of those things, depending as well on the size of that, of the, for example, low rank matrices, right? Again, I'm assuming the smaller low rank metrics it is, the easier it is to, the harder it will be to create some kind of malicious attacks. But it potentially will be also harder to see improvement in validation set, right? Because you can imagine that, let's say your validation set is how good it does on math, and it's just not going to get better on math if you just have 2 kilobytes of updates to parameters, because it requires a systematic improvement to the capabilities of the model.
Yeah, I do agree. Cici, by the way, you're muting. I know you're speaking.
No, I was taking notes, actually. This is well said.
I think, I mean, the other kind of just thought I've had was broader, if you're giving this to developers, are there also ways for developers to design model architectures that are trying to extract user information? Because I think that's another dimension of kind of do. And I mean, we also thinking about it on the agent side, right? As you're designing agents, like if the developers malicious, they're gonna try to actually extract user data from through this interaction. So there's kind of another dimension of this as well, which you potentially can like train a model to generate model architectures that are in updates will actually, like when you update, it will encode the information of the user that you actually want.
Yeah, exactly.
So actually, I remembered another question I had. So you said that you want users to send an update once a month, right? So in case of these models, I guess it's highly dependent on the use case, right? But it's one thing when the model is already well trained and you're just updating it, right? How does the model boot? How do you bootstrap the model? Do you like do you reduce the update time to like once per day, or is the model initially already somewhat good and federated learning is only used for maintenance?
It actually depends on the project. If the project, like, you can just set up any frequency you want, and we don't have like it's not like when it comes to iPhone, you only can update in a certain period because everybody's using it. But then we give the different projects the flexibility to update it. Like whenever they think this is a great time to update it, we've got enough parameters. The model's intelligence has to be updated.
And for the, I'm also curious, what is the update? I assume the like whatever multiple kilobyte update. This is not the whole model, right? This is the LoRa, right? So how big are the base models? Do you have any insight into what is the because I presume they should be small enough for the iPhone to unroll them without draining the battery, right?
Yeah, so we have like we're supporting 4 models at this moment, and this just pretty much all the open source model size. Like there's like 7B, there's like just like regular size that we support. So that is the base model that we use.
Yeah, I definitely need to read up more on the actual approach. I think 32 kilobyte update time it's it's not even LoRa. It's something even smaller.
I mean, what kind of improvements do you see actually through this? I guess that's probably like an interesting question around like for how many users sending updates like that, like how much improvement you can actually get on what kind of problems, on what kind of evaluation sets.
The improvements in terms of the next next step.
Well, in terms of the evaluation set that you're using, like if it's I mean, if it's like a 7B llama and you're testing it on, I don't know, doing math or doing next token prediction for keyboard or whatever, right?
Yeah. So now we're like doing some improvements on the agent. We're doing our own DApp, and it's a service aggregator. And it basically it's like we're calling like the whole end-to-end agent to finish, for example, Uber deliveries and DoorDash deliveries and even Amazon orders. And this is the improvement that we're using in the evaluation data set that we're testing on the POFL.
What does the agent do in case of what is the agent in this case of, like, let's say Uber DoorDash deliveries?
So by the end of the day, we do want this to be very personalized agent that can do everything for you, and personalized assistant that can just one-stop respond to all your requirement. But now we only have been pushed like two service aggregator directions. One is the Uber, one is the DoorDash, and one is the one is the Amazon delivery. So those are the three aggregators, and we think that the data can be really valuable because it's essentially the human or like the user behavior data. And yeah, and fundamentally what we want to achieve is two direction. One is that, okay, now we have an agent that can help people to do a lot of the, like the services or the real-time applications. The other is we do want to prove that the proof of federated learning in this evaluation data set actually works by having people seeing their data compressed into a parameter, and you can actually access all the data from the wallet and see the data or parameters on chain.
What is the model predicting in case of the DoorDash delivery? Like, is it like the actual process of ordering stuff, or is it at the delivery time? What does the agent do? Like, as a user, what is my interaction with the agent?
Your interaction is the agent is that, so for example, when you are interacting with LUI, right, like language user interface, and you are telling the model that, okay, you want to eat something, and then like it just automatically locates your position, and it just like, orders whatever you want based on the databases you have, and based on the prediction of like what should be the taste of the food you like, and then they just automatically execute and retrieval the correct app that just retrieval the services based on that.
So I guess with Uber it's the same. It's like trying to predict where I'm going.
Yes, Uber is the same too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember. Interesting enough, Illia and I were doing that in 2017. Obviously, less. The technology wasn't as sophisticated, but turns out it's not that frequent. At least in case of an Uber, unless it's literally your next event in the calendar, it's not that easy to predict where the Uber is going. So yeah, it would be interesting to see if the time has changed and now it's more predictable.
The user experience that you will be able to get right now is, as a user, you can we have our own open source model called Fairy. You talk to our Fairy model, and then you can start to engage. Our Fairy model is really, like emotional, and it's kind of just like a assistant, that type of the model in terms of the DNA. And then when you tell the Fairy that, okay, when it triggers about Amazon's or Uber, it just automatically redirects you to there and finish the service for you, and you can always go back. And you can be able to select if you want to, you want to earn some tokens by contributing this data. And then you can actually access the parameters that's we put on chain of this data, and you can see from the wallet, you can access from the wallet, you can see on chain, and you can see how much token you get.
So I presume you guys are like battle testing it locally, right? So like how frequently, like what percentage of Uber rides you don't have to intervene and it gets it right?
What percentage of it depends on user. So like if the user wants 100%, then they get more token. If the user wants like 50, 70, then it depends on them.
Yeah. No. My question is, when you personally use it, what percentage of Uber rides that Fairy orders are correct, and what percentage you still have to intervene?
Oh, now we have like around 90% accuracy out there on the Ubers, and there's only 10% of the edge cases that you will never know.
Mm-hmm. And like in terms of so that's a question more in terms of user research, right? So hypothetical Siri, I don't use any Apple product, right? So let's see, Google, whatever it's called, Google Siri. She can guess more than 90% of things I want correctly, right? Like if I say, okay, Google, and ask her for something, she gets it more than 90% of the time, right? And yet I never use her because the 5% it doesn't get it. They're extremely low, right? So like the sheer expectation in my head that I can get into those 5% makes me, like I would set an alarm manually, even though it's going to take me 10 seconds longer, right? So I'm curious if this is something, if in your experience, you're sort of crossing the threshold where people, because ordering an Uber is not like you're not saving a person an hour of work, right? Like it's a different thing, like if it was ordering flights, right? Or hotels, right? But Uber is 20 seconds job, right? So presumably you're saving them 10 seconds. So do you already see users preferring the how do you call it, LUI over manual entry, or is it still in the future?
Yes, this is really still in the future. So far, like user only interact with the LUI. And for the Uber, yeah, I mean, by the end of the day, the service is different from the way you interact with the GPT or Anthropic or these models, right? Because the service is more of experience, and would you really be able to experience this good, agent execution workflow for you? So I would say that I think the accuracy in this type of the scenario is not really important. But what's more important is if the model is triggering the correct thing for you, or if you can actually even provide a user feedback loop to that and tell your model what do you want. So then like it can be more and more personalized.
Yeah, I think here's an analogy is like that interesting to compare something like Instagram, right, where it actually creates demand instead of just predicting what you want. And so, and over time, potentially get you excited about doing something. I mean, Uber maybe not the right example, but broadly speaking,
DoorDash would be a good example.
At DoorDash, yeah, like, oh, you saw something that would be exciting for you, and you actually will order it. I mean, there's still metrics around like click through, etc. But yeah, I think there's an interesting opportunity of like what is experience beyond where you're balancing, and this is where like for me an important question, like how do we balance beyond kind of optimizing for profit of the company that presents you these options to actually optimizing for individuals' well-being, right? In kind of broader sense, because kind of Instagram right now, either way, it is optimized for you to spend more time on Instagram, but that's not because they care about you, but more because it generates them more money. And so how do we kind of transition here to more like, hey, this is actually good for you, you're learning more, eating healthier food, for example, etc. Through these predictions as well.
That's a good question, but I want to throw a question for you as well. Would you like to have like a mom or dad or teacher in your AI or in your physical device that's alert you saying, hey, eat healthy, no snacks. So even though you've been browsing through McDonald's page for like 5 minutes, and then the AI recommendation is still, I check this poke bowl or check this salad. I think that's that's something that I think the AI should be balancing, or the application should have a mechanism or a Twitter line where that they don't encourage the evil human needs more, but they don't stop it. I think that's a clear line for us to see. But that's not the POFL to say. We has to be honest and to give back the data to the model, right? But yeah, it's an interesting question. So is AI supporting you and encouraging you and just fulfilling you on whatever you already are, or it has to be acting more of a godfather or godmom to guide you into the right way? And what is the right way, right? But then again, another interesting spark idea that you just mentioned. What is the incentive that we could potentially embed it within this incentive infrastructures to give users a little bit more feedback or constant for us to engage with them, or for us to use guiltily use AI agents to promote anything from the advertisement perspective, whereas Instagram is obviously on top of that, right? They don't give back any users any incentive, but well, TikTok might be a even worse case study right here, that they use a great algorithm to know you better and track you or trap you into their application, spending more time. But for us, like the applications that we see or that we hope to see in the ecosystem that utilizing TOEFL, you have tremendous private data, right? How can you use it better? Can you potentially also give back the individual users a little bit more incentive based on how much advertisements they have already seen, or how many things that you help you to generate your revenue, and you gave a small portion back to the community. I think that's really important. Maybe the developers should design the mechanism within the app, or maybe the infrastructures of ours, we should have another layers of incentive mechanism to distribute that proportion out. It's an open questions for not only us, but also for the DevCon.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to figure out and research here. So, but thanks for coming. We're out of time, so exciting to hear kind of what you guys are building, and yeah, let's keep building. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and see you next week.
Thank you.